The wagon wheel cracked clean through as Willa Thompson tried to guide the loaded supply cart across the rutted trail outside Taylor, Texas. And she knew with absolute certainty that her father would blame her for it, even though he had refused to replace the rotting wood 3 weeks ago, when she had begged him to spend the money. She sat there in the scorching June heat of 1878, dust settling around her boots, and felt the familiar weight of responsibility crushing down on her shoulders, while sweat trickled down her spine beneath the faded calico dress that had belonged to her mother before consumption took her 4 years back. The supplies she had been sent to fetch from town lay scattered across the hard, packed earth. Sacks of flour and cornmeal split open and spilling their contents, and Willa climbed down from the driver's seat with resignation already settling in her bones because she knew what waited for her at home. Her father would be drunk by now, sitting in the ramshackle house they rented on the edge of the Morrison Ranch, where he was supposed to work as a hand, but mostly just collected a petty wage while Willa did washing and mending for the other families to keep them fed. Her younger brother Samuel was only 14 and tried his best, but he was small for his age, and their father had already started teaching him that women existed to serve and men existed to take. She was kneeling in the dirt, trying to salvage what she could when she heard the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. Willa did not look up at first, just kept scooping flour back into the least damaged sack with her bare hands, but the horse stopped nearby, and she heard leather creaking as someone dismounted. "That wheel is not going to fix itself, and you are going to be out here until dark trying to save those supplies," a male voice said, not unkind but matter of fact. Willa glanced up, shading her eyes against the brutal Texas sun, and saw a tall man in dusty range clothes standing beside a sturdy roan horse. He was perhaps 25, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting, and he was already moving toward her wagon without waiting for permission or invitation. "I can manage," she said automatically, because that was what she always said. What she had been saying since her mother died and her father decided that grief was best drowned in whiskey while his daughter held everything together. The man looked at her with eyes the color of good whiskey held up to lamplight, brown shot through with gold, and something in his expression made her throat tighten. "I am sure you can," he said quietly, "but you do not have to." He walked to his horse and returned with tools from his saddlebag, then crouched beside the broken wheel and examined it with capable hands. Willa watched him, still kneeling in the spilled flour, trying to understand what was happening. Men did not help her. Men gave her more work, more demands, more expectations. Her father, her brother, the ranch hands who brought her their mending, they all took and assumed she would provide because that was what Willa did. "I am Luke Sutherland," he said as he worked, not looking at her but focusing on the damaged wheel with steady concentration. "I just signed on with the Morrison Ranch as foreman, arrived 2 days ago from New Mexico territory." "Willa Thompson," she replied, finding her voice. "My father works at Morrison's, or he is supposed to." Something flickered across Luke's face, gone too quickly for her to read. "I have met him," he said simply, and somehow those 3 words contained more understanding than a lengthy speech would have. He had indeed met Daniel Thompson, had found him passed out in the barn that very morning while the other hands were already out with the cattle, and Luke had made a note to speak with Mr. Morrison about the situation, because a ranch could not afford dead weight. But looking at this young woman kneeling in the dirt, her dark blonde hair escaping its pins and her face smudged with flour dust, her green eyes holding a kind of weary strength that made his chest ache, Luke reconsidered his assumptions about the Thompson family. "This wheel is rotted through," he told her. "It needed replacing weeks ago. I know, Willa said, and there was something in those two words that made Luke look at her more closely. I asked him to fix it. He said we could not spare the money. But there had been money for whiskey. Luke would bet his best horse on that. He stood and brushed off his hands, then held one out to help Willa to her feet. She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before taking it, and her palm was rough with calluses and work when it met his. He pulled her up gently, noticing how thin she was beneath the worn dress, noticing the careful way she moved as if accustomed to making herself small. I cannot fix this here, Luke said, but I can transfer these supplies to my horse and walk you back to the ranch. Then I will come back with a proper wagon and retrieve this one for repair. You do not have to do that, Willa protested. You must have your own work to do. I can walk back myself and figure something out. Luke was already gathering the scattered supplies, his movements efficient and unhurried. I know I do not have to, he said. I want to. Those simple words hit Willa like a physical blow. I want to. Not because it was her fault, not because she owed him, not because he expected something in return, just because he wanted to help. She stood there useless for a moment, something hot and unfamiliar burning behind her eyes, before she forced herself to move and help him consolidate what could be saved. Luke worked methodically, and she noticed he gave her the lighter items to carry while he hefted the heavy flour sacks onto his saddle. He did it without comment, without making it seem like charity, just a natural distribution of labor that acknowledged their different strengths. It was such a small thing, but Willa could not remember the last time anyone had considered her physical limitations or tried to make her burden lighter. The walk back to the Morrison ranch took nearly an hour in the oppressive heat, and Luke led his heavily loaded horse while keeping his pace slow enough that Willa could keep up without straining. He asked her questions about Taylor, about the ranch, about the country around them, and gradually Willa found herself talking more freely than she had in years. He listened like her words mattered, like her observations about the drought conditions and the struggling cattle were worth considering, and it made something long frozen in her chest begin to thaw. How long have you been managing your father's responsibilities? Luke asked when she mentioned something about the ranch's water situation that she clearly knew from personal experience. Willa was quiet for a moment. Since my mother died, 4 years now. I am 22, in case you were wondering if I was too young to speak plainly to. I was not wondering that, Luke said. You have the eyes of someone who has been holding up the world for too long. The observation was so accurate and so gently delivered that Willa had to look away, blinking hard. Someone has to, she managed. Maybe, Luke said. But it should not always be you. They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Luke helped Willa carry the supplies to the small, poorly maintained house where the Thompsons lived, and she was acutely aware of how shabby it must seem to him. The porch sagged, the door hung crooked on its hinges, and through the window she could see her father slumped at the table with an empty bottle beside him. Thank you, Willa said quietly, taking the last sack from Luke's arms. For everything. I will pay you back somehow for your time. Luke shook his head. No payment needed, but I am going to speak to Mr. Morrison about getting that wagon fixed properly and about some other things too. Willa's stomach clenched with fear. Please do not get my father fired. We need the money, little as it is. My brother and I have nowhere else to go. The look Luke gave her was complicated, full of things she could not quite read. I am not going to get anyone fired, he said. But things are going to change around here, Willa. You have my word on that. He left before she could respond, swinging up into his saddle with easy grace despite the long walk. and Willa watched him ride toward the main ranch house with her heart beating strangely hard in her chest. She did not let herself hope, had learned years ago that hope was a luxury she could not afford, but something had shifted in the foundations of her carefully controlled world. Inside the house, her father stirred when she entered with the supplies. "Took you long enough," Daniel Thompson muttered, his words slurred. "Did you wreck the wagon?" "The wheel broke," Willa said evenly. "Like I told you it would. Luke Sutherland helped me get the supplies back." Her father's bloodshot eyes focused on her with sudden sharpness. "Sutherland, the new foreman. You stay away from him, girl. Man like that is too good for the likes of you, and I will not have you embarrassing this family by throwing yourself at him." The words were so absurd, so typical of her father's twisted logic, that Willa did not even bother responding. She just put the supplies away and started preparing supper from the meager ingredients she had left, moving through the familiar motions while her mind stayed on a tall cowboy with kind eyes who had said she did not have to manage everything alone. Samuel came in as she was frying salt pork, dusty and exhausted from working in the far pastures. At 14, he was already developing their father's lean build, but his eyes were still clear and his smile genuine when he saw his sister. "Heard you had some trouble with the wagon," he said, pumping water to wash his hands and face. "Luke told me he helped you out." "You met him?" Willa asked, stirring the pan. "He is working with us today, teaching some new techniques for handling the cattle." "He actually listens when you talk, Willa. It is strange. He asked me questions about what I thought would work best for moving the herd to new grazing." Samuel's voice held wonder, and Willa understood completely. Being heard was so foreign to both of them that it seemed almost supernatural when it happened. That night, lying on her narrow bed in the tiny room she had once shared with her mother, Willa thought about Luke Sutherland and tried not to let herself imagine that his kindness meant anything beyond common decency. She had been disappointed too many times, had learned too well that people who seemed helpful often had ulterior motives. But something about the way he had looked at her, the genuine respect in his voice when he spoke to her, made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone in this world might see her as more than a workhorse to be used up and discarded. The next morning, Willa woke before dawn as always and started the fire for breakfast. Her father was snoring off his latest binge, so she worked quietly, preparing coffee and biscuits and gravy for Samuel before he headed out for another long day. She had her own work waiting, a pile of mending from 3 different ranch families and laundry to scrub, and she was already mentally organizing her day when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find Luke standing on the sagging porch, his hat in his hands and the early light making his brown hair gleam like polished wood. "Morning," he said. "I wanted to catch you before you started your day. I spoke with Mr. Morrison last night and we have made some arrangements." Willa's heart sank. Here it came, the dismissal, the eviction, the inevitable consequence of her father's failures finally catching up to them. "I understand," she started to say, but Luke held up a hand. "Your father is being moved to lighter duties," he said. "Maintenance work around the ranch buildings, things he can do closer to home and with supervision. His pay will stay the same, but he will be expected to actually work for it. Mr. Morrison is also deducting a small amount each month to pay for the wagon repairs, but I convinced him to keep it minimal." Willa blinked, trying to process this. "I do not understand. Why would Mr. Morrison agree to that? He could just fire him and hire someone who actually works." "Because I explained that Daniel Thompson has 2 children who depend on that income, and that firing him would punish them more than him," Luke said quietly. "And because I agreed to take on the responsibility of making sure he shows up and does his job." "Why would you do that?" The question came out sharper than Willa intended, born of years of suspicion and self-protection. "You do not know us. You do not owe us anything." Luke met her eyes steadily. "You are right. I do not owe you anything. But I saw you yesterday trying to save spilled flour with your bare hands because you were afraid of what would happen if you came home without those supplies. I saw how you moved like someone who is used to taking hits, even though I never laid a hand on you. And I decided that if I could make your life even a little bit easier, I was going to do it." Willa's throat closed up completely. She could not speak, could barely breathe, because no one had ever done something like this for her. No one had ever looked at her situation and decided to help without being asked, without expecting payment or favors or gratitude expressed in ways that made her skin crawl. "There is more," Luke continued. "Mr. Morrison mentioned that you do washing and mending for several families. I talked to the ranch cook, Mrs. Patterson, and she needs help in the kitchen. The work is hard, but it pays better than piecework, and you would get 2 meals a day included. If you are interested, the job is yours." "I cannot cook," Willa said automatically, even as her mind reeled at the offer. 2 meals a day, steady pay, work that would keep her at the ranch where at least there were people around instead of alone in the house with her father. "Mrs. Patterson said she would teach you what you need to know. She is looking for someone reliable more than someone experienced." Luke shifted his weight, and for the first time he looked uncertain. "I know this is a lot coming from a stranger. You have no reason to trust me, and I am not asking you to. I am just offering you options, Willa. What you do with them is entirely up to you." Samuel appeared behind Willa, drawn by the voices, and Luke nodded to him. "Morning, Sam. I was just telling your sister about the new arrangements. You got father actual work." Samuel sounded skeptical. "How did you manage that?" "I can be persuasive when I need to be," Luke said with a slight smile. "But he is going to have to actually show up and work, and if he does not, there will be consequences. I wanted you both to know that up front. Consequences for him or for us." Samuel asked, and the wary intelligence in the question made Luke's chest tighten. "For him," Luke said firmly. "You two have been paying for his choices long enough. That ends now." He settled his hat back on his head and turned to leave, but Willa found her voice. "Mr. Sutherland, wait. I accept the job in the kitchen, and thank you. I do not know why you are doing this, but thank you." Luke looked back at her, and the warmth in his eyes made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. "You can call me Luke, and you are welcome. Come by the main house this morning when you are ready, and I will introduce you to Mrs. Patterson properly." He left, and Willa stood in the doorway watching him walk toward the barn with the rising sun turning the world gold around him. Samuel touched her arm gently. "He seems different," her brother said quietly. "Like maybe he actually means what he says." "Maybe," Willa agreed, but she was afraid to believe it, afraid to let herself trust that this was real and not some elaborate setup for disappointment. But she braided her hair carefully that morning, put on her least faded dress, and walked to the main ranch house with her spine straight and her chin up. If Luke Sutherland was offering her a chance at something better, she was going to take it, even if it terrified her. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and capable hands, and she looked Willa up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen everything life could throw at a person. "Luke says you are a hard worker," she said without preamble. "That true?" "Yes, madam," Willa replied. "I have been keeping house and doing piecework for 4 years. I am not afraid of hard work." "Good, because I work hard and I expect the same from anyone in my kitchen. You will start at 5 each morning, work until after supper is cleaned up. Sundays you get the afternoon off after the midday meal is done. Pay is $20 a month plus your meals while you are working. You eat what the hands eat, no better and no worse. Fair enough. $20 a month was more than Willa made in 2 months of washing and mending, and the meals alone would save her precious resources. More than fair, madam. Thank you. Do not thank me until you have survived a week, Mrs. Patterson said, but there was a hint of a smile on her weathered face. Now come on. I will show you how I run things and you can start learning. We have 15 ranch hands to feed 3 times a day, plus Mr. Morrison and any visitors. You will earn every penny, girl, but you will also eat regularly and sleep better knowing you have steady income. The work was indeed hard, but it was also satisfying in a way Willa had not expected. Mrs. Patterson was demanding but fair, and she actually taught rather than just criticizing. She showed Willa how to manage the enormous cast iron stove, how to make biscuits in quantities large enough to feed the crew, how to stretch ingredients without sacrificing nutrition. And true to her word, Willa ate breakfast and supper at the ranch, simple food but plenty of it. And for the first time in years she went to bed with her stomach full. Luke stopped by the kitchen that evening after the hands had eaten, ostensibly to compliment the meal but really to check on Willa. She was elbow-deep in dishwater, her face flushed from the heat and her hair escaping its braid, but she looked more alive than she had yesterday. "How was your first day?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Exhausting," Willa admitted, "but good. Mrs. Patterson is a good teacher. She said you did well. Quick learner, did not complain, pulled your weight." Luke smiled. "I told her you would." Willa dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him fully. "Why are you doing all this? And please do not say it is just kindness. People are not kind for no reason, not in my experience." Luke was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "My mother raised me and my 2 sisters alone after my father was killed in the war. We were dirt poor, and she worked herself to the bone trying to keep us fed and clothed. I watched her go without so we could eat. I watched her take on extra work when she was already exhausted, and I watched the whole town look the other way because it was easier than helping." He met Willa's eyes. "When she died, I was 16 and my sisters were 12 and 14. We ended up separated, sent to different relatives. I swore then that if I ever had the power to help someone in a situation like that, I would. So that is why, Willa, because I saw my mother in you yesterday, and I could not walk away." The raw honesty in his words stripped away Willa's defenses completely. "I am sorry about your mother and your sisters. I found them again once I was grown and had steady work, got them settled properly. They are both married now, living good lives in New Mexico." Luke straightened up. "The point is, I know what it looks like when someone is drowning while everyone around them pretends not to notice. And I am not going to be one of the people who looks away." That night, Willa cried for the first time in years, great silent sobs that shook her whole body as she lay in her narrow bed. But they were not entirely tears of sadness. They were also tears of relief, of hope cautiously emerging after years of hibernation, of something that felt dangerously like gratitude that someone had finally seen her struggle and decided to help. The days developed a new rhythm after that. Willa rose before dawn and went to the main kitchen, where she and Mrs. Patterson prepared breakfast for the ranch. Luke always came in with the first group of hands, and he always thanked her for the food, always asked how she was doing. Small things, but they mattered more than he probably knew. Her father, surprisingly, was actually showing up for his assigned maintenance work, though Willa suspected that was more due to Luke's oversight than any sudden responsibility on Daniel Thompson's part. But the result was the same steady income without Willa having to cover for his failures quite so desperately. Samuel was thriving under Luke's mentorship, learning real ranch skills and gaining confidence. Willa saw her brother changing, standing taller, speaking up more, and she knew that Luke was teaching him what a good man looked like through example rather than lectures. And slowly, carefully, Willa and Luke were building something between them. It started with small conversations during meals, progressed to Luke finding excuses to stop by the kitchen at odd hours, evolved into long talks in the evening after Willa's work was done, and before Luke had to handle various ranch emergencies. They talked about everything: their pasts, their hopes, their fears, their observations about life and people and the hard country they lived in. Willa learned that Luke had spent 5 years working ranches across Texas and New Mexico, saving his money and learning everything he could about cattle and horses and land management. He was 26, had never been married, and carried a deep loneliness that he hid behind competence and responsibility. Luke learned that Willa had wanted to be a teacher before her mother died, that she loved reading and had taught herself from whatever books she could borrow. That underneath the exhaustion and weariness was a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that made him laugh unexpectedly. "You should still teach," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the parched Texas landscape. "It is not too late. I am 22 with no formal education beyond what my mother taught me," Willa said. "Who would hire me?" "Someone smart enough to recognize intelligence when they see it." Luke glanced at her. "You are wasted washing dishes, Willa. Not that it is not important work, but you could do so much more. Right now, washing dishes means I eat regularly and have money in my pocket." "That is more than I had a month ago." Willa was quiet for a moment. "You gave me that, Luke. You gave me stability and safety and people who treat me with respect. That is not nothing." "It is the bare minimum you deserve," Luke said quietly, "and someday I hope you will believe that." It was Mrs. Patterson who first noticed the way Luke looked at Willa when he thought no one was watching, the gentle care he took with her, the way his whole face softened when she smiled. The older woman said nothing directly, but she started making sure Willa had reasons to deliver messages to Luke, to seek his advice on ranch matters, to be in his vicinity more often. "That man is sweet on you," Mrs. Patterson said one morning as they kneaded bread together. "And unless I miss my guess, you feel the same." Willa's hand stilled in the dough. "I do not know what I feel," she admitted. "I have never had anyone treat me the way he does, like my thoughts matter, like I matter." "That is because you never had anyone decent before," Mrs. Patterson said bluntly. "Your father is a drunk and your mother, God rest her, was too beaten down to teach you what you deserved. But Luke Sutherland is a good man, Willa, and good men are rarer than gold in this world. If he cares for you and you care for him, do not let fear stop you from reaching for something real. What if I am wrong about him? What if this is all just kindness and I am reading more into it because I am desperate for someone to care?" The questions tumbled out before Willa could stop them, all her deepest fears laid bare. Mrs. Patterson gave her a look that was half exasperation and half affection. "Child, that man reorganized the entire work schedule of this ranch to make your life easier. He spent his own money to fix that broken wagon. He checks on you at least 5 times a day, and I use the word checks loosely because mostly he just wants to see you. If that is not caring, I will eat my best apron." That evening, Luke asked Willa if she would take a walk with him after supper was cleaned up. They strolled out past the corrals, into the open country where the evening breeze offered some relief from the day's heat. The sky was turning purple and gold, and somewhere a mockingbird was running through its repertoire of stolen songs. "I want to talk to you about something," Luke said, and there was a nervousness in his voice that Willa had never heard before. "And I need you to know that you can say no, and it will not change anything about your job or your place here. I would never use my position to pressure you into anything." Willa's heart was beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "All right." Luke stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious and open and terrifyingly vulnerable. "I have been trying to figure out how to say this for weeks now, trying to find the right words, the right time. But I think maybe there is no perfect way to tell someone that they have become the most important person in your world." "Luke," Willa whispered, but he continued. "Since the day I met you, you have been on my mind constantly. The way you keep going even when you are exhausted. The way you care for your brother even when your father gives you nothing. The way you are so damn strong and do not even realize it." He took a careful breath. "I am falling in love with you, Willa Thompson. Maybe I have been since I saw you kneeling in the dirt trying to save spilled flour, because you were more worried about disappointing someone else than about your own comfort." Tears were streaming down Willa's face, but for once they were tears of pure joy. "I thought I was imagining it," she managed. "I thought I was making it up in my head because I wanted so badly for someone to see me." "I see you," Luke said, reaching out to cup her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I see how hard you work, how much you sacrifice, how much you deserve better than what life has given you. And I want to be the person who gives you better, Willa, if you will let me." "I do not know how to do this," Willa admitted, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady under her palms. "I have never been courted. I have never had anyone put me first. I do not know the rules." "There are no rules," Luke said softly. "Just you and me figuring it out together. Just me doing my best to make you happy and you letting me try." "You already make me happy," Willa said. "Every day in 100 small ways. The way you make sure I eat enough. The way you ask my opinion about things. The way you look at me like I am someone worth looking at." She took a shaky breath. "I am falling in love with you too, Luke Sutherland, and it terrifies me because I do not know what I would do if I lost this." "You are not going to lose me," Luke promised. "I am not going anywhere, Willa. I am right here and I am staying." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. But Willa leaned into him instead, her hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with all the longing and hope and desperate affection she had been holding back. It was her first kiss, and it was everything she had never let herself dream about, tender and respectful and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Luke rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to court you properly," he said, "with everyone knowing my intentions. I want to marry you, Willa, not right away, but eventually. I want to build a life with you where you never have to wonder if you matter, because you will wake up every day with me showing you that you do." "Yes," Willa said simply. "Yes to all of it." News of their courtship spread through the ranch quickly, and the reaction was largely positive. The ranch hands had seen how hard Willa worked, and they had seen how Luke treated her, and most of them figured it was about time something good happened to the Thompson girl. Mrs. Patterson was openly delighted, and immediately began planning what she would cook for the wedding supper whenever that day came. Daniel Thompson, predictably, had a different reaction. He cornered Willa one evening when she came home to collect some of her things, his face red with drink and anger. "You think you are too good for us now," he demanded. "Running around with the foreman, acting like some kind of lady." "I am not acting like anything," Willa said evenly, years of practice keeping her voice calm in the face of his rages. "I am being courted by a good man who treats me with respect. That is all." "Respect," her father spat. "He is using you, girl. Men like that do not marry women like you. He will ruin you and move on, and then where will you be?" The words were designed to hurt, to plant seeds of doubt, and a month ago they might have worked. But Willa had been watching Luke for weeks now, had seen how he treated everyone from the lowest ranch hand to Mr. Morrison himself with the same steady decency. She knew what kind of man he was. "You are wrong," she said quietly, "and I am not going to let you poison this for me. I am moving into the bunkhouse Mrs. Patterson set up for the kitchen workers. I will send money for Samuel, but I am done living here." "You ungrateful little—" Daniel started, but Samuel appeared in the doorway. "Let her go, Father," her brother said, and there was a new strength in his voice, an echo of the man he was becoming under Luke's guidance. "She has earned the right to her own life. Let her go." Daniel turned his anger on his son, but Samuel stood his ground, and eventually the older man subsided into muttering and reached for another bottle. Willa gathered her few possessions, hugged her brother tightly, and walked away from that house without looking back. The room Mrs. Patterson had arranged was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the ranch yard. Willa set her things down and sat on the bed, and for the first time in her life she felt like she was in a space that was truly hers. No father to tiptoe around, no constant vigilance needed, just peace and safety and the knowledge that she had people who cared about her. Luke found her there an hour later, just sitting in the quiet, and when she saw him in the doorway her face lit up with a smile that made his heart turn over in his chest. "Mrs. Patterson told me you moved in," he said. "Are you all right?" "I am perfect," Willa said, and she meant it. "I am free, Luke. For the first time in my life I am actually free." He crossed the small room and pulled her into his arms, and they stood there together as the last light faded from the sky, holding each other and breathing together, and silently acknowledging that this was a turning point, a moment when Willa's old life truly ended and her new life began. The courtship that followed was unlike anything either of them had experienced. Luke courted Willa with a steadiness and attention that left her breathless. He brought her wildflowers he found while riding the range. He taught her to ride properly, with a good horse and proper instruction, instead of just being expected to manage. He sat with her in the evenings and read aloud from books he borrowed, knowing how she loved stories but rarely had time to read for herself. And in 100 small ways every single day, he put her needs first. He made sure she was not overworking herself in the kitchen. He arranged with Mrs. Patterson to give Willa an extra afternoon off each week. He learned that she had never had store-bought candy and showed up one day with peppermints from town, just to see her face light up. He noticed when she was tired, when she was worried, when she was happy, and he adjusted himself to support whatever she needed. "You do not have to do all this," Willa told him one Sunday afternoon when they were sitting by the creek that ran through the ranch property, or at least what was left of it in the drought. "I am already courting you. You have already won me over." "It is not about winning you over," Luke said, his fingers tangled with hers. "It is about making sure you know every day how much you mean to me. You spent years being treated like you did not matter, Willa. I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you do." Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. "I have never been anyone's priority before. It feels strange. Good, but strange." "You are my priority," Luke said simply. "You and your happiness and your safety and your dreams. That is how it should be between people who love each other." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You really love me, with everything I have," Luke confirmed. "Do you doubt it?" "Sometimes," Willa admitted. "Not because of anything you do, just because old fears die hard." Luke shifted so he could look at her properly. "Then I will keep showing you until the fears die completely, however long that takes." As summer deepened into the brutal heat of July, the ranch struggled with the ongoing drought. Cattle were thin, water sources were drying up, and there was talk of having to sell off part of the herd. Luke worked long hours trying to manage the situation, and Willa saw less of him as he dealt with various crises. But even exhausted and stressed, he still made time for her. He still stopped by the kitchen every morning to kiss her forehead and tell her good morning. He still checked in throughout the day when he could. He still sat with her in the evenings, even if he was sometimes so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. "You need to rest," Willa scolded gently one night when he had nearly fallen asleep sitting up. "You are running yourself into the ground." "I need to make sure you are all right first," Luke mumbled. "Need to see you." Willa's heart melted. "I am fine. I am always fine now because I have you, but you will not be any good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." She walked him to the foreman's cabin and made him promise to sleep, then watched from his doorway until he was settled before heading back to her own room. Mrs. Patterson was waiting for her with a knowing smile. "That man would work himself to death if you did not look after him," the older woman observed. "Just like you would do for everyone else. Good thing you have each other to maintain some balance." It was true, Willa realized. Luke took care of her, but she was learning to take care of him too. To notice when he had not eaten, when he was pushing too hard, when he needed someone to tell him it was all right to rest. They were learning to be partners, to share burdens instead of each carrying their own alone. In August, Mr. Morrison called a meeting of all the ranch staff to discuss the drought situation. The news was not good. They were going to have to sell a significant portion of the herd and might have to let some hands go. The mood was grim as people contemplated reduced wages and uncertain futures, but Luke stood up with a different proposal. He had been researching and corresponding with ranchers in other areas, and he believed there was a way to drive the herd to better grazing territory about 50 miles north, where recent rains had left the grass in better condition. It would be a hard drive, risky, but if they succeeded, they could maintain the herd size and keep everyone employed. "I will lead the drive myself," Luke said. "It will take about 2 weeks there and back, maybe longer depending on conditions, but I think it is our best option." Mr. Morrison considered this. "If we lose cattle on the drive, we are worse off than if we just sold them here. If we sell them here, we get bottom prices because everyone knows we are desperate," Luke countered. "If we move them to better grass, we can hold them until prices improve." "It is a gamble, but I think it is worth taking." The discussion went on for another hour, but eventually Mr. Morrison agreed to Luke's plan. They would take most of the herd north, leaving just a small group behind with a skeleton crew to maintain the ranch. It would be hard and dangerous, but it gave them a fighting chance. That night, Luke found Willa in the kitchen helping Mrs. Patterson prepare supplies for the drive. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the worry in her green eyes even though she tried to hide it. 2 weeks, she said quietly, maybe longer. "I will come back," Luke promised, crossing to her and taking her hands. "I will always come back to you, Willa. I know. I just do not like the idea of you being gone that long, and the drive will be dangerous." She squeezed his hands. "I am trying not to be selfish about this. The ranch needs you to do this." "You are not selfish," Luke said firmly. "You are someone who cares about people and worries about them. That is not selfishness, that is love." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "I am going to go check on something in the pantry that will take at least 10 minutes, she announced, and left them alone. Luke pulled Willa into his arms and just held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I am going to ask you something, and I need you to think about it seriously before you answer." "All right," Willa said against his shoulder. "When I come back from this drive, I want to marry you. I know we have only been courting for a few months, but I know what I want and who I want it with." "You are it for me, Willa Thompson. You are everything I have been looking for without knowing I was looking." He pulled back enough to see her face. "So when I come back, will you marry me?" Willa's eyes were shining with tears again, but she was smiling. "You are asking me now because if something happens on the drive, you want me to know you were going to ask." "Nothing is going to happen on the drive," Luke said. "But yes, I want you to know. I want you to know that you are my future, Willa. Everything I do, every decision I make, I am thinking about coming back to you and building a life with you." "Then yes," Willa said. "Yes, when you come back, I will marry you. I will marry you and spend the rest of my life with you, and probably drive you crazy with worry, and you will do the same to me." Luke laughed and kissed her, deep and thorough, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks. "I will be back in 2 weeks, and then we will start planning our future properly." The drive left at dawn 2 days later, with Luke at the head of a group of 8 experienced hands and several hundred head of cattle. Willa watched them go from the porch of the main house, her heart in her throat, and she did not relax until Mrs. Patterson came out and put an arm around her shoulders. "He will be fine," the older woman said. "Luke Sutherland is as capable as they come, and he has too much to come home to risk being stupid." Willa threw herself into work to keep from worrying too much. She helped Mrs. Patterson with the reduced cooking duties, worked in the garden, and spent time with Samuel teaching him some of the reading and writing their mother had taught her. Her brother was bright and soaked up knowledge eagerly, and Willa realized that when she and Luke married, she wanted to make sure Samuel had opportunities too. The first week passed slowly, but without incident. The second week dragged even more, and Willa found herself watching the horizon constantly, hoping to see dust from the returning riders. It was actually 17 days before they returned, and Willa saw them coming from where she was hanging laundry behind the kitchen. She dropped the wet shirt she was holding and ran toward the incoming riders, not caring how it looked, just needing to see that Luke was all right. He saw her coming and urged his tired horse into a faster pace, meeting her halfway and swinging down from the saddle to catch her as she threw herself at him. They held each other tightly, both of them dusty and sweaty and not caring at all, and Luke was laughing as he spun her around. "I told you I would come back," he said into her hair. "You took longer than you said," Willa accused, but she was laughing too, giddy with relief. "We had some complications with a flash flood, had to detour around some rough country, but we did not lose a single head of cattle, Willa. Not one. And the grass up north is good enough that we can rotate the herds and keep everyone working." Luke set her down but kept his arms around her. "We did it." Mr. Morrison was delighted with the results of the drive and gave Luke a significant bonus, which Luke immediately started planning to use for a future with Willa. That night, he presented her with a simple gold ring. "It is not fancy," he said, "but I wanted you to have something real. A promise that I meant what I said before I left." Willa slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. "When?" she asked. "As soon as you want," Luke replied. "Tomorrow, next month, next year, whatever you want, Willa, this is your choice." Willa thought about it, thought about all the years she had spent with no choices and no control. "A month from now," she decided. "That gives us time to plan something small but nice, just family and close friends, nothing fancy, just real." "Real is all I want," Luke agreed. They were married on a clear September day when the heat had finally broken, and there was a hint of coolness in the air promising fall. The ceremony took place at the ranch, with Mr. Morrison standing up as witness and Mrs. Patterson crying happy tears. Samuel was there, proud in borrowed finery, and even Daniel Thompson showed up sober and clean, managing to behave himself for his daughter's wedding. Willa wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair that Luke had picked that morning. She had never looked more beautiful, standing in the late afternoon light with her hand in Luke's while they promised to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the simple ceremony ended, and they were pronounced husband and wife, Luke kissed Willa with a tenderness that made several of the watching cowboys look away with suspiciously bright eyes. This was what love looked like, what it meant when two people chose each other and committed to putting each other first. The celebration was simple but joyful, with good food and music and dancing as the sun set. Luke and Willa danced together, not caring that neither of them was particularly skilled, just happy to be in each other's arms with their future stretching out bright before them. "Happy?" Luke asked as they swayed together. "I did not know I could be this happy," Willa admitted. "I did not know this kind of happiness existed." "Get used to it," Luke said, smiling down at her, "because I plan to make you this happy every single day for the rest of our lives." They spent their wedding night in the foreman's cabin, which was now theirs to share, and Willa learned what it meant to be truly intimate with someone who loved her, who cared about her pleasure and her comfort, who made her feel cherished and safe. It was overwhelming and wonderful and perfect, and she fell asleep in Luke's arms feeling more complete than she had ever imagined possible. The months that followed their wedding were an education for both of them in what it meant to build a life together. They had disagreements, of course, but they learned to talk through them instead of letting resentment fester. Luke learned that Willa needed him to explicitly ask for her opinion sometimes, because she was so used to her thoughts not mattering. Willa learned that Luke needed her to tell him when she was overwhelmed instead of just pushing through until she collapsed. But through it all, Luke's fundamental approach never wavered. He put Willa's needs first, not in a way that diminished his own, but in a way that made her feel valued and important. He made sure she had time to read, helped her continue Samuel's education, supported her when she decided to start teaching some of the ranch children basic reading and writing in the evenings. When winter came and the work slowed, Luke surprised Willa with a trip to San Antonio. It was her first time in a real city, and he delighted in showing her everything shops and restaurants, and a bookstore where he insisted she pick out whatever she wanted. Willa chose 3 books and then tried to put 2 back, saying they were too expensive, but Luke just smiled and bought all 3 plus 2 more he thought she would like. "You do not have to keep buying me things," Willa protested as they walked back to their hotel. "I know I do not have to," Luke said. I want to give you all the things you never got before, all the little luxuries and joys that you deserve. Let me, Willa. Let me spoil you a little." "You spoil me every day," Willa pointed out. "You made me breakfast this morning so I could sleep late. You carried all my packages today without complaining. You listened to me talk about that fabric for 20 minutes even though I know you do not care about fabric." "I care because you care," Luke said simply. "That is how this works." In the spring, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Luke one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he would be happy, and his reaction did not disappoint. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe, and when he finally released her there were tears on his face. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, even though she could see that he was. "I am terrified and thrilled and so damn happy I could burst," Luke said. "We are going to do this right, Willa. Our child is going to grow up knowing they are loved and wanted and that their needs matter. They are going to grow up with 2 parents who care for each other and for them. They are going to have everything we did not." Willa's pregnancy was not easy. The Texas heat made her sick, and she was exhausted all the time, but Luke was there for every moment of it. He brought her water when she could not keep food down. He rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings. He took over more of her responsibilities without making her feel guilty about it. He did research and asked questions and made sure she had the best care available. Mrs. Patterson watched all this with satisfaction. "That man worships the ground you walk on," she told Willa one afternoon when Luke had just left after bringing his wife fresh lemonade and a pillow for her back. "He takes care of me," Willa agreed. "Sometimes I still cannot believe it is real." "Believe it, child. And make sure that baby grows up knowing what a good marriage looks like, because you too are giving that child quite the example." Their daughter was born in November of 1879, a squalling red-faced infant with dark hair and her mother's green eyes. They named her Rose, after Willa's mother, and Luke fell completely and utterly in love the moment he held her. Watching Luke with their daughter, Willa saw the same care and attention he gave her extended to this tiny person. He changed nappies without complaint, walked the floor with Rose when she cried at night, sang to her in his rough cowboy voice. He made sure Willa got enough rest, took over the baby care when Willa was exhausted, and constantly checked to make sure his wife was recovering well. "You are going to spoil her," Willa said one evening, watching Luke rock their sleeping daughter. "Absolutely," Luke agreed without shame. "I am going to spoil both my girls rotten and not feel bad about it at all." Samuel, now 17 and working as a full hand on the ranch, was a devoted uncle. Daniel Thompson had actually managed to stay mostly sober for the past year, doing his maintenance work and keeping to himself, and he had met his granddaughter exactly once before declaring babies were women's work and going back to his solitary existence. It hurt Willa less than she expected. She had her own family now, her own people who loved her, and her father's limitations were his problem, not hers. As Rose grew from infant to toddler, Willa watched her daughter absorb the lessons of their household. She saw Rose observe how Luke asked Willa's opinion about things, how he made sure his wife ate before he did, how he listened when she spoke. She saw her daughter learning that this was how people who loved each other behaved, and she was grateful beyond words that Rose would grow up with such a different example than Willa herself had known. On their second wedding anniversary, Luke surprised Willa by announcing that he had been saving money and talking to Mr. Morrison about purchasing some land adjacent to the ranch. His plan was to eventually start their own small ranch, building something that would be theirs to pass down to Rose and any other children they might have. "You have been planning this?" Willa asked, stunned by the scope of his vision. "Since before we got married," Luke admitted. "I have been saving and planning and working toward giving us a real future, something solid that cannot be taken away. Mr. Morrison is willing to sell us 200 acres at a good price, and he will let me keep working as foreman until we are established enough to go out on our own completely." Willa thought about this, about Luke planning their future without even telling her, because he wanted to surprise her with security and stability. "You put together an entire plan for our future without consulting me," she said, and Luke's face fell. "I wanted to surprise you. I thought you would be happy, but you are right. I should have discussed it with you first. I am sorry, Willa. We can forget the whole thing if you want." "I did not say I was not happy," Willa interrupted. "I was just observing that you planned all this yourself. And then I was going to say that I think it is a wonderful idea and we should absolutely do it." Relief flooded Luke's face. "You do?" "Of course I do. You are giving us a legacy, something real that we built together. How could I not want that?" Willa moved into his arms. "But next time maybe include me in the planning stages." "Deal," Luke agreed. "We plan our future together from now on." They purchased the land and began the slow process of building their ranch. Luke worked hard, putting in long hours both as foreman and on their own property, but he never let that work interfere with his attention to Willa and Rose. He still made time for family dinners. He still tucked Rose into bed every night. He still made sure Willa knew she was his priority. When Rose was 3, Willa became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a healthy boy they named James, after Luke's father. Watching Luke with his son, seeing the same gentle care he gave to everyone he loved, Willa felt her heart overflow with gratitude for the life they had built. "You are crying again," Luke observed one evening, finding her in the rocking chair with tears streaming down her face while she nursed their son. "Happy tears," Willa assured him. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now from what I thought it would be, how you changed everything." Luke knelt beside the chair and put his hand over hers where it rested on James's small back. "We changed everything together," he corrected. "You let me love you, Willa. You trusted me enough to let me care for you, even when it went against everything you had learned about how the world worked. That took courage." "I did not feel courageous. I felt terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear," Luke said. "It is doing the thing anyway. You were afraid and you let me in anyway. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen." By the time Rose was 5 and James was 2, their own ranch was well established. They had a small herd of cattle, a sturdy house that Luke had built with his own hands and help from the Morrison ranch hands, and a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. Luke had transitioned from foreman to running their own operation, and Willa had started her long-dreamed of school, teaching the children of nearby ranches and farms 3 days a week in a room they had built onto the house specifically for that purpose. Samuel was 21 and engaged to a sweet girl from Taylor, planning his own future with the confidence of someone who had been shown what a good man looked like. Even Daniel Thompson had faded into a quiet old age, living in a small cabin on the Morrison property, and existing on a small pension Mr. Morrison provided for his years of service. One evening, with Rose and James finally asleep and the ranch settled for the night, Willa and Luke sat on the porch of their home and looked out over the land they had built together. The stars were brilliant overhead, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to its mate. "Are you happy?" Luke asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding night and countless times since. "I am so happy that sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream," Willa admitted. "You gave me everything, Luke. A home, a family, work that I love, security. Everything." "You gave me just as much," Luke said. "You gave me purpose. You gave me someone to build a life for and with. You gave me children I adore. You gave me a reason to be the best man I can be." He took her hand, his thumb running over her wedding ring. "And I plan to keep giving you everything I can for the rest of our lives. That is what you do when you love someone, Willa. You put their needs first, you care for them, you show them every single day that they matter." "You do that," Willa said softly. "Every single day, without fail, you show me that my needs matter to you, that I matter to you. You are my world," Luke said simply. "You and Rose and James. Everything I do is for you 3. They sat together in the peaceful darkness, hands linked, surrounded by the life they had built through love and hard work and unwavering commitment to each other. Willa thought about the girl she had been when Luke found her, alone and exhausted and convinced that her life would always be defined by sacrifice and service to people who did not value her. She thought about how one man's simple decision to help had changed the entire trajectory of her existence. And she thought about the future stretching ahead of them, full of promise and possibility, anchored by the knowledge that she had someone who would always put her needs first, who would always care for her, who would always love her with the steadiness and devotion that Luke brought to everything he did. "I love you," she said, the words inadequate for the depth of what she felt but the best she had. "I love you too," Luke replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that for the rest of our lives." 2 more children followed in the years to come. Another daughter they named Clara, and a second son they called William. Each child was welcomed with joy and raised with the same care and attention that Luke had always shown Willa. The ranch prospered, growing slowly but steadily into one of the most respected operations in the area. Willa's school expanded, eventually operating 5 days a week with help from a young woman she had trained. And children from miles around received educations that opened doors their parents had never imagined. Rose grew into a confident young woman who expected to be treated with respect because that was what she had always known. James became a thoughtful boy who helped with his younger siblings and showed early signs of having his father's steady temperament. Clara was fierce and independent, and William was sweet and gentle, and all 4 children grew up knowing they were loved beyond measure. Luke's sisters came to visit from New Mexico territory, and Willa loved meeting the women who had survived their own hardships and emerged strong. They adored Luke's family and marveled at the life he had built, and they told Willa stories about the boy Luke had been, already showing signs of the man who would put others first and work tirelessly to take care of the people he loved. "He was always like this," his older sister Sarah confided. "Even when we were children and he was barely old enough to work, he would save his pennies to buy us ribbons or candy. He would go without to make sure we had what we needed. That is just who Luke is." "He still does that," Willa said. "He still puts everyone else first." "Not everyone," Sarah corrected with a knowing smile. "He puts you first, Willa. The rest of us are lucky to come second to you and those beautiful children." It was true. Luke organized his entire life around Willa's needs and happiness. When she was tired, he took over her responsibilities without being asked. When she was stressed, he found ways to lighten her load. When she was happy, he made sure to create more moments like whatever had brought her joy. He anticipated her needs before she voiced them, paid attention to the small details of her life, and consistently demonstrated through actions, rather than just words, that she was his priority. And Willa, who had spent the first 22 years of her life believing that her purpose was to serve others while her own needs went unmet, slowly learned to accept and then expect this treatment. She learned that it was all right to want things, to need things, to ask for help. She learned that a partnership meant 2 people caring for each other, not one person doing all the giving while the other took. She also learned to reciprocate, to put Luke's needs first in the same way he did for her. She made sure he ate properly when he was focused on ranch work. She listened to his worries and offered perspective. She created a home that was his refuge from the demands of running their growing operation. They became true partners, each caring for the other, each putting the other first, creating a balance that sustained them through good times and challenges alike. When Rose turned 16, a young man from a neighboring ranch began paying attention to her. Willa watched her daughter evaluate this suitor with a critical eye, measuring him against the example her father had set. The boy was nice enough, but he clearly expected Rose to defer to him, to accommodate his preferences without question, and Rose was having none of it. "He is not right for me," Rose told her parents one evening. "He thinks I should be grateful for his attention, but he does not actually care what I think or want. He is nothing like father." Luke looked both proud and slightly panicked. "You are only 16. You have plenty of time to find someone who treats you the way you deserve." "Someone like you treat mother," Rose said matter-of-factly. "That is what I want. Someone who listens to me and values my opinions and actually cares about my happiness." "That is a good standard to have," Willa told her daughter. "Do not settle for less than you deserve, Rose. I did not have a choice about settling when I was young, but you do. Use it." Rose did eventually find a young man who met her standards, a schoolteacher from San Antonio who courted her with respect and genuine interest in her thoughts. Luke was predictably protective, but had to admit that the young man treated Rose with the care and consideration she had been raised to expect. When they married, it was with Luke's blessing and Willa's joy, and both parents felt confident they had raised a daughter who would accept nothing less than true partnership in her marriage. James, more interested in horses than romance, devoted himself to developing the ranch's breeding program and proved to have a remarkable gift for training difficult animals. Clara declared her intention to become a doctor, a nearly impossible goal for a woman, but one her parents supported wholeheartedly. William, the youngest, was still finding his path but showed signs of being a writer, filling journals with observations and stories. Through it all, as their children grew and their ranch expanded, and the years rolled by, Luke and Willa remained the foundation of it all. They celebrated 20 years of marriage, then 25, watching their hair gray and their children become adults with children of their own. They became grandparents, delighting in spoiling Rose's children the way Luke had spoiled his own. And through all those years, Luke never stopped putting Willa first. It became such an ingrained part of who he was that he did it without thought, as natural as breathing. He made sure she had time to read even when the ranch was demanding all their attention. He supported her school even when money was tight. He listened to her dreams and did his best to make them reality. "You have been taking care of me for over 30 years, Willa said on their 30th anniversary, sitting in the same spot on their porch where they had sat so many times before. "Do you ever get tired of it?" Luke looked at her like she had asked if he got tired of breathing. "Never. Taking care of you is not a burden, Willa. It is a privilege. It is the greatest honor of my life that you let me love you and care for you." "I could not have survived without you," Willa said honestly. "I was drowning when you found me and you threw me a rope." "You would have survived," Luke disagreed. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am glad I could make your survival easier. I am glad I could give you a life where you did not just survive but thrived." Willa leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and content in a way she had never imagined possible in those dark days before Luke entered her life. "We built something good here," she said. "Something real and lasting. Our children know what love looks like. Our grandchildren are growing up with the same example. That matters." "It matters more than anything," Luke agreed. "We broke the cycle, Willa. Neither of us had good examples of marriage or parenthood, but we figured it out together. We created something better." As the sun set over their ranch, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold, Willa reflected on the improbable journey that had brought her to this moment. From a girl convinced she existed only to serve others, she had become a woman who knew she mattered, who had built a life of purpose and love, who had raised children who understood their own worth. And it had all started with a cowboy who saw her struggling and decided to help. A man who put her needs first, not because he expected anything in return, but because that was simply who he was. A man who showed her through thousands of small actions over decades that she was worthy of care and consideration and love. "Thank you," Willa said quietly. "For what?" Luke asked. "For seeing me, for caring, for never giving up on showing me that I mattered." Willa turned to look at her husband, seeing the lines that time had etched around his eyes and the gray liberally threaded through his hair, seeing the man who had been her partner and her love for more than half her life. "For putting my needs first, every single day, without any thought." Luke smiled and pulled her closer. It was never a sacrifice, Willa. Loving you, caring for you, putting you first, that was the easiest thing I ever did. You made it easy by being you." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that defied the limitations of their pasts. They had created a legacy of love and care that would ripple out through their children and grandchildren. A model of what partnership could look like when two people committed to putting each other first. And as the night settled around them and the peaceful sounds of their ranch filled the air, Willa Thompson Sutherland felt complete. She had everything she had never dared to dream of: love, family, purpose, security, and most importantly, the absolute certainty that she mattered to someone who would spend the rest of his life proving it to her. That someone was her husband, her partner, her great love. Luke Sutherland, the cowboy who had stopped to help a struggling woman on a dusty road and changed both their lives forever. The man who had seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. The man who had put her needs first from the very beginning and never stopped, not for a single day. And she had done the same for him, creating a marriage built on mutual care and respect and devotion. They had learned together what it meant to truly love someone, to put their needs alongside your own, to build a life that honored both people equally. It was, Willa thought as sleep began to claim her there on the porch in Luke's arms, exactly what love was supposed to be. Not one person sacrificing everything while the other took, but two people caring for each other with equal devotion and unwavering commitment. She had never had anyone put her needs first before Luke, and he had done it every day without any thought for over 30 years. That was love. That was partnership. That was the life they had built together, and it was beautiful.